If you are watching the news, you probably have been bombarded with what has been taking place here in the United States in particular, as it relates to our president and the FBI director and his firing, and so many other ramifications tied to that. But I don't want to go down that road this morning. However, I do want to call attention to you to something that just took place very recently in the last week that is very significant in the Middle East, and I don't want it to be overshadowed necessarily by the things that you're seeing maybe on the news and what the focus of the news is today here in the United States. Something very significant took place in Turkey. By President Erdogan. Now, I will clarify, his name looks in English like it's spelled Erdogan with a G. I've been told that it's Erdogan. You don't really say the G the way we would here in the United States, so I'll try my best to pronounce it properly. Erdogan. He made a comment during a speech that he gave regarding the Palestinians. Now, you know who the Palestinians are. Raise your hand if you understand. I'm not asking for a lot of details, but you generally know who the Palestinians are, right? In the land of Israel. And there is a lot politically that has gone on with the Palestinians as it relates to the nation of Israel. And there is a very uneasy peace that is taking place throughout the land of Israel, because you have Jewish people, of course, who live in the land of Israel, Israelis, but you also have Palestinians or Arab Palestinians that are there and have been there really since 1948, Israel's War of Independence. You have these Palestinians that are so-called refugees. They actually, in many instances, have it much better in Israel than they would and they do in other Arab countries surrounding Israel. That's a point that you won't hear made very much in the news media. But I want to call your attention to a speech that Erdogan gave. We'll just read a little bit of it and I'll comment as we go along. Erdogan calls on Muslims to flood Jerusalem's iconic mosque and protect its Islamic identity. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has called on Muslims around the world to visit Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. Now, how many of you know where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is in Jerusalem? The Al-Aqsa Mosque is on the Temple Mount. Okay, the Temple Mount, just to give you, I always like to have pictures behind me to help show this a little bit better when I'm talking geography and places, but if you can see in your mind's eye, Jerusalem basically is divided into 4 quarters. This is the old city of Jerusalem, inside of the old city walls, 4 quarters. And there is a section, in addition to those 4 quarters, which is called the Temple Mount. This is the area, it's basically a rectangle. It was the mountain, we believe, upon which Abraham was called to offer Isaac. You have this Temple Mount area. It was the mountain, the peak of a mountain in Jerusalem, when Herod the Great came and he wanted to impress the Romans, the emperors of Rome. He was a master builder. When Herod the Great came along, he decided he wanted to improve and enlarge the temple that was already there in Jerusalem. So what he did to make a bigger platform in order to build a grander temple in Jerusalem, he put reinforcing walls around the Temple Mount, around that rectangular area, and then backfilled the area to make a large mount. So when you hear the words Temple Mount today in Jerusalem, that is a rectangular shaped area. Upon now, which sits on top of it, is the Dome of the Rock, that gold-shaped dome that you see in all the pictures of Jerusalem. That's not technically a mosque, it's a shrine, but it is Islamic. And it sits on the Temple Mount, that rectangular area that Herod the Great reinforced with large walls around it, backfilled it, made a larger platform, and the temple sat on top of there. When the Romans came and destroyed the temple, later, much later, you had Islam came in and they built their Dome of the Rock, that gold dome structure that sits on top of the Temple Mount, okay? But next to it, on the Temple Mount as well, what you focused on when you see pictures of Jerusalem is that gold-shaped Dome of the Rock. But next to it, also on the Temple Mount, is a very large mosque called the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And if you look at pictures of Jerusalem, there's a gray dome over that mosque. So the Al-Aqsa Mosque that's being spoken of here by Erdogan is that mosque that sits on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, which was a holy place for the God of Israel, that Temple Mount area with the temple that stood there. Now, of course, it's overrun and it's being run by Islam and Muslims. So Erdogan says he calls on Muslims around the world to visit the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem to protect the site's Islamic identity. The Turkish leader also took the opportunity to heap scorn on Israel, likening the country's policies to South Africa's apartheid era, which is ridiculous. Speaking in Istanbul at a charity conference discussing Palestinian economic development, Erdogan lashed out at Israel regarding its settlement plans in the West Bank and Jerusalem. Now, when he says the settlement plans in the West Bank, remember, is a section of property within Israel. This was given by God to Israel. But today, on the western side of the Jordan River, you have what's called the West Bank, and you have a lot of Palestinians who live in that area. And Israel is building settlements as Jerusalem expands. Israel is building settlements or communities. Just like we have suburbs of Orlando, Israel is building suburbs around the city of Jerusalem. And they're building some of them in that area called the West Bank. Well, of course, Muslims don't like that at all. And he says, he continues, we as Muslims should be visiting Al-Quds more often. Al-Quds is an Arabic way of saying Jerusalem. They don't like to call it Jerusalem or Yerushalayim. They like to use their own term for Jerusalem. So when you hear Muslims or Arabs talking about Jerusalem, most of the time they'll call it Al-Quds, Q-U-D-S, Quds. So we Muslims should be visiting Al-Quds more often, Erdogan said, using the Arabic name for Jerusalem. Each day that Jerusalem is under occupation is an insult to us. So can you imagine the audacity? He's saying that the Jews are occupying really a Muslim area and Muslim land. And it's just the opposite that's true. You have Israel, the Jewish people in Jerusalem, particularly in West Jerusalem, but it's the Muslims who are occupying the Temple Mount, which is the place where God's home on earth was, in Jerusalem. And he says, as many as 26,000 Turks visited the Temple Mount, or they call it the Noble Sanctuary, in 2016. So Turkish people, 26,000 visited that site in Jerusalem. However, Erdogan emphasized hundreds of thousands should be visiting the site, which is considered holy by Muslims. He says it would be the greatest support to our brothers there, he said. Now, Palestinians are not Turks, but he calls them brothers. What do they have in common? Islam, the religion of Islam. And he says, Al-Quds is holy for all three divine religions. It is the heart and summary of all human history. Kind of remarkable to hear that coming from Erdogan. Al-Quds is holy for all three divine religions. What you should notice in these things, there's some subtle differences and important distinctions he's making. He is not necessarily trying to antagonize the religions of Judaism, of Christianity, and of course Islam, which is his own. What he's criticizing primarily is the political faction of Israel, the government of Israel. So he's trying to walk a fine line in these quotes. And he says, both in terms of our religion and historical responsibility, Al-Quds and the fight of our Palestinian brothers for rights and justice is of great importance to us. We will keep making efforts for Quds to turn into a city of peace. Now, what he's doing, if you know anything about Erdogan and what's been going on in Turkey, they have just voted to abolish essentially their secular Turkish constitution in favor of a presidential system, which really, that sounds kind of nice to an American audience, except you should know that basically he controls everything. The new rules, the new laws that he has been working towards for many years is really essentially setting himself up as an Islamic or an Arab sultan, or a Turkish sultan, or a caliph. So he wants to rule over, Erdogan wants to rule over not only Turkey, but he wants to reestablish the Ottoman Ottoman Turkish Empire, which was only abolished not that long ago at the end of the First World War, between 1917 and 1923. He wants to reestablish that Ottoman Turkish Caliphate. Now, where did Turkey control when they had their caliphate, when they had their empire? They controlled not only the area we call today's Turkey, but they controlled portions, big portions of Syria and Lebanon, and what they call Palestine, which is Israel today, all the way down to Egypt, including portions along the Red Sea of the Arabian Peninsula, which was inclusive of Mecca and Medina. So the Ottoman Turkish Empire controlled a significant swath, the majority of the Middle East. So when Erdogan, who says we need to flood the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and we need to stand up for our Palestinian brothers, what he is doing is he is trying to ingratiate himself as the leader of the Arab world. What unifies the Arab world? They have lots of problems, the Arab world. They don't agree on almost anything. But what they agree on is that they hate Israel, and they use the Palestinian people that are living in Israel as a political pawn against Israel. So him, by saying, we need to stand up for our poor Palestinian brothers and the occupation that is overtaken them by the Jews in Israel, what he is saying is, I am supporting the Palestinian cause, and hey, Arab world, support me as the supreme leader of the Arab world. And the rest of the Muslims in the Arab world say, hey, Erdogan's saying what none of our leaders have the courage to say. He's standing up for our poor Palestinian brethren in the Holy Land. So therefore, Erdogan is trying to elevate himself as a supreme sultan or leader within the entire Arab world. And he's using these kinds of speeches to do that. Erdogan also said that permanent peace in the region would only be possible with a fair solution to the Palestinian issue. And I'm just skipping on. It says, here's the only solution: the establishment of a fully sovereign and independent Palestinian state, with East Jerusalem as its capital, along the lines of the 1967 borders. Erdogan reiterated Turkey's support for Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, and by the way, Mahmoud Abbas, do you know that the Palestinian leadership, this is over the Palestinians who are living in the land of Israel, in the area of Israel, in the West Bank and in Gaza, do you know that they have a government policy that says they actually pay money, lots of money, to the families of Palestinian martyrs who blow themselves up in terrorist bombings, killing Israelis? That when a suicide bomber from a Palestinian area goes into a Jewish area, commits a terrorist act, whether it's a stabbing or blows himself up or anything like that, or drives a car into a group of soldiers or children or whatever it may be, that the Palestinian government has a policy of sending extra money to the family of the martyr, who they call them martyrs, the terrorist family. That's what we're dealing with. So here Erdogan is supporting Mahmoud Abbas. And he criticized attempts by Israeli lawmakers to limit the use of loudspeakers for the Muslim call to prayer. If you go to Israel today, you'll see there is freedom of religion for Christians, for Jews, and for Muslims. And there are Muslim mosques that are built, and they have the call to prayer. But Israel doesn't want its country overrun by these loudspeakers and calls to prayer from these minarets in the mosques. And Erdogan, of course, is criticizing that. Erdogan's speech attracted a stinging response from Israel, who said the leader has no rights to preach morality. Whoever systematically violates human rights in his own country shouldn't preach morality to the only true democracy in the region. And if you know what's going on with Erdogan in Turkey, he has just recently, in order to pass these new laws, to do away with this Turkish constitution, to set himself up with the power that he has been systematically locking up hundreds of thousands of those who oppose him in Turkey, journalists, those in academia, judges, military personnel. He's been locking them up, and they're not being heard from again. This is what's going on in Turkey today. And of course, Turkey is part of NATO, so this becomes a very significant issue for America. Israel adheres strictly to full freedom of worship for Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and we will continue to do so in spite of this baseless slander, noted a sharp statement from Israel's foreign ministry. Israel's newspaper, Haaretz, reported that Israel had not originally planned to respond to Erdogan's speech, but Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu changed his mind after the remarks were widely reported by domestic and international media. During his address, Erdogan also warned the Trump administration not to move its embassy, the United States Embassy, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, saying the step would be extremely wrong and ill-advised. Erdogan said, "It is not a simple location change. Those who think that way are not aware of how delicate the balance is in the Holy Land." There are amazing things that are taking place in our world today, and most people are unaware of those changes taking place in the Middle East and the things that are being said. We, again, are living on the cusp, I think, of the last days. We don't know how long it will take for these things to pan out, only the Lord does, but we should be watching and carefully in prayer. So I wanted to call that to your attention. By the way, if you are following us on Facebook, these types of articles and others, we will be posting them to our Facebook page and our Twitter accounts, so you can see them there. This one will be posted later today on our Facebook page, so if you want to take another look at it or share it with someone else, I encourage you to do so.